The Witch and the Definitely Dead Detective by Sadie Brent, Chapter 3, A Leap into the Unknown. The morning sunlight poured into Evie's tiny kitchen, illuminating the clutter of half-packed boxes stacked in every corner. The smell of coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the sharp tang of a lemon-scented candle she'd lit to chase away the mustiness. She cradled a chipped ceramic mug between her hands, staring blankly at her laptop screen. Her blog dashboard blinked back at her, the cursor hovering over a blank post. The title line taunted her, a new adventure. She'd typed it out in a fit of optimism, but now it felt like a challenge she wasn't ready to meet. "What am I even doing, Spinks?" she muttered. Her cat, perched regally on a stack of books by the window, flicked his tail in response. The question lingered in the air, heavy with doubt. Evie had spent the better part of the night turning it over in her mind. The idea of leaving behind everything she knew, her routines, her friends, even this cramped apartment she could barely afford, felt both thrilling and terrifying. But staying here? That felt like slow suffocation. She closed the laptop with a sigh, abandoning the half-hearted attempt at a blog post. Instead, her eyes drifted to the letter still pinned to the refrigerator with a leaf-shaped magnet. "Okay, let's make a list," she said aloud, grabbing a notebook and pen from the table. Spinks chirped approvingly. At the top of the page she scrawled, "Reasons to stay." Beneath it she hesitated, tapping the pen against her chin. Familiarity. Annie, but she's far away anyway. Not uprooting my life again. Her handwriting grew sloppier as she scribbled the words. She flipped the pen around in her hand and stared at the 3 measly lines. Not much of a case, huh? Next she wrote, "Reasons to go. Potential fresh start. Lizzie's estate could solve my financial mess. Adventure. Maybe. I need this." Her hand lingered over the last line. The words felt raw and true, and for a moment the knot in her chest loosened. The sound of her phone vibrating on the table broke her train of thought. She glanced at the screen, Simino Law Offices. "Here we go," she said, taking a deep breath before answering. "Hello? Good morning, Miss Hutchison." Freda's voice was as cheerful as ever. "I've finalized your travel arrangements. You'll be flying into Charleston on Friday morning, and Mr. Simoneau will have someone pick you up at the airport to drive you to Stony Fork." "Okay," Evie said, pulling out her calendar and jotting down the details. "Thank you, Freda." "My pleasure. Oh, and Mr. Simoneau asked me to remind you that everything has been covered. Flights, transport, even lodging for the weekend. He wants you to focus on enjoying the experience." Enjoying the experience. Evie couldn't help but snort. "I'll try my best," Freda laughed. "I'm sure you'll love it. Stony Fork is a charming little town, and Lizzie's estate is just, well, you'll see. It's special." Something in Freda's tone gave Evie pause. She wanted to ask what she meant by special, but before she could, Freda wrapped up the call with a cheery goodbye. Evie set the phone down and stared at the scribbled notes in her planner. Friday. That gave her 2 days to finish packing and prepare herself mentally. The thought made her stomach flutter with a mix of excitement and dread. 2 days? She murmured, looking over at Spinks. "Think I can pull it together by then?" The cat blinked at her, unimpressed. Evie's apartment was a maze of cardboard boxes and plastic bins, each one labeled in her looping handwriting. She shoved another armful of sweaters into a box, pausing to press the flaps closed before taping it shut. The faint scent of lavender drifted from the bin marked candles and supplies, reminding her of the DIY workshops she used to run for her blog followers. She trailed her fingers over the edges of the bin, a pang of longing tugging at her heart. She'd loved those workshops, the way they gave her a sense of purpose. Somewhere along the line, though, life had pulled her away from that creative spark. Bills, deadlines, the grind of working for a company that ultimately didn't care about her. It had all smothered the joy out of her craft. Maybe that is another reason to go. The thought lingered as she packed the last of her books, pausing to flip through the pages of a weathered journal tucked between 2 novels. It was one of her mother's old diaries, filled with neat, careful handwriting. Evie traced the faded ink on the inside cover. She hadn't opened the journal in years, not since her mother had passed. Now curiosity nudged her to flip through its pages. The entries were mundane at first, grocery lists, family schedules, but one page stopped her cold. August 12, 1996. Lizzie came by again today. Always full of strange ideas, that one. I told her to leave well enough alone, but she won't listen. She never does. Evie's chest tightened. Her mother's words were sharp and dismissive, but there was something unspoken beneath them. Something unresolved. What had Lizzie done to earn her mother's ire? Evie shut the journal and slid it into her bag. Maybe the answers were in Stony Fork. The night settled over the city, draping the streets in a blanket of stillness. Rain tapped against the window in soft, rhythmic bursts, and the faint rumble of thunder echoed in the distance. Evie sat cross-legged on the floor of her living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes. A candle flickered on the coffee table, casting golden light across the room. She ran her fingers over the edges of a faded photograph she'd found while packing. It was of her as a child, holding a bouquet of wildflowers in a backyard she barely remembered. Her mother stood behind her, arms crossed and unsmiling. Evie stared at the photo, a lump forming in her throat. "What would you think of all this, Mom?" she whispered. "Would you even want me to go?" Spinks patted over and nudged her hand with his nose. His quiet purrs filled the silence, grounding her in the present. "Maybe it doesn't matter what you'd think," Evie said softly, setting the photo aside. "Maybe this is about what I need." The rain outside grew heavier, the storm rolling closer. Evie closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. Despite the uncertainty, the fear, and the questions that lingered in her mind, she felt the faintest flicker of hope. Stony Fork might not have all the answers, but it was a place to start.